Hello, so we're going to be picking up where we last left off in the Jesus Storybook Bible. The last story we read was about Abraham and Sarah giving birth to Isaac. If you want to check that out, you can find it in my Bible ASMR playlist or my reading. I have like an ASMR reading playlist of just reading all sorts of different books. So, let's begin. Okay. And we're gonna, this will probably be a lengthy video, sorry. I'll put timestamps for each story. And we're gonna get caught up until right before the birth of Jesus to be in time for, I'm planning to hopefully read the birth of Jesus story on Christmas Day, so yeah. And I'm gonna try to do like some tracing like at the end of each section, but not so much in each section, so there's less interrupting, but yeah. Okay, so let's begin. The present, the story of Abraham and Isaac from Genesis chapter 2. God knew that his secret rescue plan could only work if Abraham trusted him completely. God had to make sure that Abraham would do whatever he asked. So a few years later, God asked Abraham to give him a present. Abraham liked giving presents to God. He gave God his animals. They were called sacrifices, and they were a way to say, "I love you," to God. But this time, God didn't want a lamb or a goat. God wanted Abraham to give him something more. Much more. He wanted Abraham to give him his son, his only son, the son he loved, Isaac. Put his boy on the altar and kill him as the sacrifice? How could God want him to do such a terrible thing? His father who loved him. Skipped a line. Abraham didn't understand, but he knew that God was his father who loved him, and so Abraham trusted him. Early the next morning, Abraham and Isaac set off. They climbed the steep, stony trail up the mountain. Isaac carried the wood on his back. His father carried the knife and the coals. Papa, Isaac said, "we have everything except we forgot the lamb for the sacrifice." "God will give us the lamb, son," Abraham said. They built an altar and laid the wood on top. Abraham asked his son to climb on top of the wood. Isaac didn't understand, but he knew his father loved him, and so he trusted him. He climbed up onto the altar, and Abraham tied his boy to the wood. Isaac didn't struggle or try to run away. He just lay there quietly and didn't make a sound. Everything was ready. Abraham took the knife. Tears were filling up his eyes. Pain was filling up his heart. His hand was shaking. He lifted the knife high into the air. "Stop," God said. "Don't hurt the boy. I want him to live and not die. I know now that you love me because you would have given me your only son." Abraham felt his heart leap with joy. He unbound Isaac and folded him in his arms. Great sobs shook the old man's whole body. Scalding tears filled his eyes, and for a long time they stayed there like that in each other's arms. The boy and his dad. Suddenly, Abraham saw a ram caught in some brambles, the sacrifice. God had given them what they needed just in time. The ram would die so Isaac didn't have to, and so Abraham sacrificed the ram instead of his son. And as they sat there on the mountaintop, watching the embers of the fire die in the cool night air, the stars above them sparkling in the velvet sky, God helped Abraham and Isaac understand something. God wanted his people to live, not die. God wanted to rescue his people, not punish them, but they must trust him. One day someone will be born into your family, God promised them, and he will bring happiness to the whole world. God was getting ready to give the whole world a wonderful present. It would be God's way to tell his people, "I love you." Many years later, another son would climb another hill carrying wood on his back. Like Isaac, he would trust his father and do what his father asked. He wouldn't struggle or run away. Who was he? God's son, his only son, the son he loved, the Lamb of God. The little stars. I just want to point out too that in the New Testament, in Hebrews chapter 11, it talks about how Abraham in this moment knew that God would even be able to raise his son back to life if he needed, because God had promised Abraham that through Isaac he would have many descendants, and through his descendants many nations would be blessed. And so Abraham knew that God wouldn't break his promise, so he's like, this won't be the end. God's gonna do something. So it was a test of Abraham's faith in God's promise. But God never condones child sacrifice in the Bible. But also, Isaac was not a child at this point. He was a grown adult. But the biggest point of this story was to foreshadow Christ and his sacrifice for all of us, and his death on the cross that paid for our sins. He fulfilled the thing that none of us could. I love these little wispies from the fire, if you can tell. Do you prefer tracing with my finger or this? Or I have this paintbrush. I love the beautiful colors and pictures on each page. The details. Going up the hill. Alright, let's go to the next section. It's cool too to think about how God told Abraham, I will provide the lamb, and he did, ultimately in Jesus. Many years later on what was likely the same hill, but we're not for sure about that, but that's really cool to think about. Okay, oh wait, that's not. The girl no one wanted. The story of Jacob, Rachel, and Leah from Genesis 29:30. Okay. Rachel, Leah. Okay. There were once two sisters. The youngest sister was very beautiful, and her name was Rachel. But the oldest sister wasn't beautiful at all. Some thought her quite ugly, and her name was Leah. Rachel was the kind of girl who always gets invited to parties and chosen for the team. Everyone loved her, and poor Leah, no one hardly ever noticed her. One day, their cousin Jacob came to stay. He was one of Isaac's sons, and he was on the run. Jacob had stolen and cheated and made some enemies, including his own brother, and now he was hiding. The funny thing is, Jacob, of all people, was the one God gave the special promise to. The same promise he had given his grandfather Abraham. I will rescue the people through your family. But then God chooses people we least expect, as we'll see. Jacob stayed a long time working for his uncle, Laban. One day Laban said to Jacob, I've decided to pay you for your work. What do you want? A sudden thought struck him. How about one of my daughters? Jacob looked at Rachel and he looked at Leah. Sorry, this book's hard. Who would he choose? Of course he chose Rachel. I'll work 7 years for free, Jacob said, if I can marry Rachel. So Jacob worked 7 years, and at last his wedding day arrived. But that night, Laban played a nasty trick on Jacob. Instead of sending Rachel to marry Jacob, he sent Leah. Now in those days, they didn't have electricity, so it was dark in their tent. And besides, women wore veils, and you couldn't see their faces properly. So Jacob suspected nothing. The next morning, Jacob woke up and screamed. His new wife was lying beside him, but it wasn't Rachel, it was Leah. Jacob jumped out of bed. Laban, he cried, you scoundrel. But Laban said, work for me another 7 years, and then you can marry Rachel. So Jacob worked for Laban another 7 years, and at last Rachel became his wife. Now Jacob had 2 wives, but his 2 wives, Jacob loved Rachel the best. Okay, I just want to say that as I'm reading these stories, for those that aren't familiar with the Bible, it's important to understand that these were written at a very different time and place in history. And yeah, it is interesting how Jacob didn't realize he was with the wrong woman. Some people say maybe because they had the wedding party first that he could have been drunk at that point. But yeah, I just want to say that these stories that you read about in the Old Testament, just because they happened doesn't mean they were right. But God used broken, messed up situations to bring redemption. Ultimately, in Jesus, he was the only one that did live rightly. But all of these situations aren't condoning certain things, but it's just broken situations that God used. So I just want to clarify that for anybody that's new and is what are these stories? God can use anyone at any time, in any circumstance, so that should give you hope and encouragement that you're not too far gone for God to use. So, yeah. Okay. No one loves me, Leah said. I'm too ugly. But God didn't think she was ugly, and when he saw that Leah was not loved and that no one wanted her, God chose her to love her specifically, to give her a very important job. One day, God was going to rescue the whole world through Leah's family. Now, when Leah knew that God loved her in her heart, suddenly it didn't matter anymore whether her husband loved her the best or if she was the prettiest. Someone had chosen her. Someone didn't love her with a never... Someone did love her with a never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. So when Leah had a baby boy, she called him Judah, which means this time I will praise the Lord. And that's just what she did. And you'll never guess what job God gave Leah. You see, when God looked at Leah, he saw a princess, and sure enough, that's exactly what she became. One of Leah's children's children would be a prince, the Prince of Heaven, God's son. This prince would love God's people. They wouldn't love them with all his heart, and I keep saying the opposite. They wouldn't need to be beautiful for him to love them. He would love them with all his heart, and they would be beautiful because he loved them. Like Leah. Okay, next story. So yeah, got Leah, kiddos, with little sheep. It makes me, these pictures like inspire me to do some like painting. It almost looks like watercolor, maybe, I don't know. Alrighty, next story. The Forgiving Prince, or for those familiar with the Bible, the coat of many colors is how I knew it growing up. Alrighty, this is found in Genesis 37 through 46. Joseph and his brothers. Jacob had 12 sons, but of all his sons, Joseph was his favorite. One day, Jacob gave Joseph a splendid new robe. It was beautiful and rich with all the colors of the rainbow, but it made Joseph's brothers jealous. They wanted rich rainbow robes too. Then, to make matters worse, Joseph kept on having these special dreams. I dreamed I was the greatest. I was king, Joseph told his brothers, and you all bowed down to me. Now I'm sure you know, even if Joseph didn't, that telling your brothers things like that isn't a very good idea. Joseph's brothers hated him even more. They wanted to kill Joseph in his dreams, and one day that's exactly what they tried to do. They tore Joseph's rainbow robe off of him and sold him to slave traders for 20 pieces of silver. The traders took Joseph to Egypt and made him into a slave. The brothers went home and lied to their father, telling him that Joseph was dead. That's the end of that dreamer, they thought, but they were wrong. God had a magnificent dream for Joseph's life, and even when it looked like everything had gone wrong, God would use it all to help make the dream come true. God would use everything that was happening to Joseph to do something good. Meanwhile, though, things were not looking good for Joseph in Egypt. He was far from home and from his dad. Then he got blamed for something he didn't do, and even though he had done nothing wrong, he was punished and thrown in jail. But God had not left Joseph. One night, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had a scary dream about thin cows gobbling up fat cows. What on earth did it mean? He didn't know. But Joseph was a dream expert, so Pharaoh sent for him. It means a famine is coming, Joseph explained. There won't be enough food. Pharaoh was so pleased by Joseph's skill that he immediately took Joseph out of jail and made him a prince. Now back home, Joseph's brothers had run out of food and everyone was hungry. God's special family was in danger. If they didn't get food soon, they would starve to death. So Joseph's brothers traveled to Egypt to buy food. They came and knelt before the new prince. His brothers didn't know that the prince was Joseph, but Joseph knew who they were. Joseph's dream, the one about his brothers bowing down to him, was coming true. It's me, Joseph cried. When they saw it was Joseph, his brothers were afraid. They had wronged Joseph. They had sinned, and they knew it. Now, Joseph would certainly punish them. But Joseph looked at his brothers, and his eyes filled with tears. Even though his brothers had hurt him and hated him and wanted him dead, in spite of everything, he couldn't stop loving them. His heart, which they had broken, filled up with love, and Joseph forgave them. Joseph threw his arms around them. Don't be afraid, he said. Behind what you were doing, underneath everything that was happening, God was doing something good. God was making everything right again. Joseph didn't punish them, he rescued them. He brought God's special family to live safely with him in Egypt. One day, God would send another prince, a young prince whose heart would break. Like Joseph, he would leave his home and his father. His brothers would hate him and want him dead. He would be sold for pieces of silver. He would be punished even though he had done nothing wrong. But God would use everything that happened to this young prince, even the bad things, to do something good, to forgive the sins of the whole world. Joseph hugging his brothers because he forgave them. Prince of Egypt, or like second in command type of thing. Highly recommend reading the story of Joseph in the Bible. It's a good one. He went through a lot. His coat of many colors is fun. It's got the rainbow coat. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, red, orange, yellow, green. And now we have another story. God to the rescue, Moses and the great escape from Egypt. This is found in Exodus 3 through 13. Joseph and his brothers grew old and died, but their children's children stayed on in Egypt, where they became a very large family. Later on, a new king began to rule, but this Pharaoh didn't remember Joseph, and he didn't like God's people. He made them into his slaves and beat them and made them work harder and harder. God's people cried out to God to rescue them, and God heard them. He remembered his promise to Abraham. He would look after his people. He would find a way to set them free. One day, Moses was looking after sheep when suddenly something caught his eye. A bush was behaving very oddly. It was flickering with flames, but its leaves weren't burning up. He took a closer look. Moses, boomed a big voice. Moses leaped back. The bush was talking to him. I have heard my people's cries, God said. I have seen their tears, so I have come down to rescue them. Go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go free. Moses was afraid, but God said, I will be with you. So Moses went to Pharaoh. Pharaoh, Moses began. God, said Pharaoh. Never heard of him. Moses kept going. God says, let his people go free. Why would I? Why should I? Pharaoh said. Don't want to? Won't. So he didn't. So God gave Pharaoh 10 warnings called plagues. First, God turned the river Nile into blood. No one could drink the water, but still Pharaoh would not let them go. So God made frogs come hopping and leaping and jumping. And your bed frogs, and your hair frogs, and your soup frogs, all over everywhere frogs. Make them go away, Pharaoh screamed. Then your people can go. So God took the frogs away. Oh, those are bugs. Pharaoh changed his mind. You can't go, he said. Then God sent a zillions of gnats, but still Pharaoh said no. So then God sent swarms of flies buzzing in your eyes, flies, and after that sickness and horrible boils and huge hailstones and a storm of locusts, then darkness when it should have been day, until it seemed that the whole world, creation and everything was coming undone, falling back into darkness and emptiness and nothingness. Gnats and flies, frogs. That's Pharaoh and Moses. But each time Pharaoh said, make it stop, and then I'll let them go. And each time when God made it stop, Pharaoh changed his mind and said, actually, no, you can't go. Finally, Moses warned Pharaoh, "Obey God, or he will have to send the worst thing of all." Pharaoh just laughed. So God said, "The oldest boy in each family of Egypt must die, but my people will be safe." God told his people to take their best lamb, to kill it, and to put some of its blood on their front doors. "When God passes over your houses," Moses explained, "God will see the blood and know that the lamb died instead of you." That night it was just as God had said. Suddenly, piercing the darkness, echoing down the corridors of the palace, came a blood-curdling scream. Pharaoh's oldest son had died. At last, Pharaoh did what God said. "Get out," Pharaoh shouted. "Just go." And so, that very night, Moses and God's people fled out of Egypt and out of slavery. They were free at last. God's people would always remember this great rescue and call it Passover. But an even greater rescue was coming. Many years later, God was going to do it again. He was going to come once more to rescue his people. But this time, God was going to set them free forever. They're escaping officially out of Egypt. All the Israelites that were enslaved. Stars in the sky. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frogs and 1, 2, 3, 4 gnats. Or these are flies. These are gnats. Moses and his staff. Obviously, I suggest reading this from the Bible because there's a lot that this leaves out that's like really cool to read about. Alrighty, next story. God makes a way. This is Moses and the Red Sea from Exodus chapters 14 and 15. Moses and God's people escaped out of Egypt and into the wilderness. They didn't know the way, but God knew the way, and he would show them. "I will bring you a new home, a special land," God promised them. "I will look after you. I am with you." God sent a big cloud for them to follow, a pillar of smoke stretching up to the sky. It moved in front of them as they walked and shaded them from the blazing heat of the day. And when it was time to rest, it stopped. All through the cold desert nights, it kept them warm, glowing like a fire. God led his people through the desert to the edge of a great sea. They were just wondering how to cross it when suddenly they heard a terrible thundering and pounding. It sounded almost like horses' hooves. They shaded their eyes to look back and screamed. It was Pharaoh and his army were coming to get them. Pharaoh had changed his mind again. "Get my slaves back," he screeched, and charged out into the desert after them with 600 of his fastest horsemen and every single chariot in Egypt. He was not happy. What were God's people going to do? In front of them was a big sea. It was so big there was no way around it, but there was no way through it. It was too deep. They didn't have any boats, so they couldn't sail across, and they couldn't swim across because it was too far and they would drown, and they couldn't turn back because Pharaoh was chasing them. They could see the flashing swords now glinting in the baking sun and the dust clouds, and chariot after scary chariot surging towards them. So they did the only thing there was left to do: panic. "We're gonna die," they shrieked. "Don't be afraid," Moses said. "But there's nothing we can do," they screamed. God knows you can't do anything, Moses said. God will do it for you. Trust him and watch. But there's no way out, they cried. God will make a way, Moses said. Another minute and it would have been forever, but then the strangest thing happened. God made the pillar of smoke move. It moved behind his people and hid them from the Egyptians. Then God sent a strong east wind to blow all night long. It blew on the water of the big sea. It blew it to the left and it blew it to the right, until it blew it into two towering walls of water. And there, right through the middle of the sea, a muddy pathway opened up, and God's people walked across on dry land. They walked on the dry land. When the Egyptians tried to follow, the walls of water crashed back down on them and swallowed them up. God's people were safe. They danced and laughed and sang and thanked God. When there had been no way out, God had made a way. Many years later, once again, God was going to make a way where there was no way. From the beginning, God's children had been running from him and hiding. God knew his children could never be happy without him, but they couldn't get back to him by themselves. They were lost. They didn't know the way back, but God knew the way, and one day he would show them. They made it. All the people standing there. They crossed. I love how they have little fish jumping out. Must have been scary not knowing what was going to happen. Until God opened up the seas for the Israelites to get through. Pharaoh and his horses, he was not happy. Not happy. Alrighty, let's start on the next story. 10 Ways to be Perfect. Moses and the 10 Commandments from Exodus 16, 17, 19 through 40. It's a lot of chapters. Okay. So there they all were. Grannies, granddads, babies, uncles, aunts, children, moms, and dads. Out there in the middle of a desert. They had blisters from all the walking. They were hungry and thirsty and much too hot. We don't like it, they said. It stinks. And so did they, for that matter, because no one had taken a bath in weeks. Now remember, because this is something they'd forgotten, God had done amazing things for his people. He'd hidden... Now remember, because this is something they had forgotten, God had done amazing things for his people. He'd hidden them inside a cloud. He'd moved the sea. He'd set them free. But God's people still weren't happy. They didn't care about being free. Wasn't it better when they were slaves? At least they had lots of nice food to eat. God doesn't want us to be happy, they said. It was the same lie that Adam and Eve had heard all those years before. God has brought us out here to kill us. God doesn't even love us. But they didn't know God very well, did they? Every day of their journey, God kept on showing his people how well he would look after them. If they would trust him and obey him, When they were hungry, God made the sky rain with food. Bread coming down from heaven. What is it? They asked each other. They didn't know, so they called it, "What is it?" Which, of course, is a very good name for something when you don't know what it is, which translates to manna. When they were thirsty and started quarreling, God made water flow from a rock. Moses called that place Quarreling because that seemed like a good name too. And still, God's children didn't trust him or do what he said. They thought they could do a better job of looking after themselves and making themselves happy. But God knew there was no such thing as happiness without him. So God led them to a tall mountain. God wanted to talk to his people and show them what he was like. He wanted to help them know him better and tell them about the special land he was going to give them. The whole earth belongs to me, God said, but I have chosen you. You are my special family. I want you to live in a way that shows everyone else what I'm like, so they can know me too. God called Moses up the mountain. The great mountain shook. A thick cloud fell, thunder roared, lightning crackled, and God gave Moses 10 rules called commandments. I want you to love me more than anything else in all the world, and know that I love you too. God told them that's the most important thing of all. God gave them the other rules, like don't make yourselves pretend gods, don't kill people or steal or lie. The rules showed God's people how to live and how to be close to him and how to be happy. They showed how life worked best. God promises to always look after you, Moses said. Will you love him and keep these rules? We can do it. Yes, we promise. But they were wrong. They couldn't do it. No matter how hard they tried, they could never keep God's rules all the time. God knew they couldn't, and he wanted them to know it too. Only one person could keep all the rules, and many years later, God would send him to stand in their place and be perfect for them, because the rules couldn't save them. Only God could save them. 10 Commandments. Okay. It's Moses, the 10 Commandments, and the people. It's like glowing, because it says in the Bible it'd actually glow after talking to God. The lightning. Like to this day, there's like in Israel, Mount Sinai. I forget if it's called by a different name today or not, but there's a mountain that's charred on the top, which is believed to be the mountain that God spoke to Moses on, because it was always burning. Or like there's clouds of smoke around it whenever God would be talking to Moses up on the mountain. That's what the Bible says, so it's still charred to this day. All the manna falling. That'd be cool to like eat bread that came from heaven. It says it was like sweet, like it sounds like it was like sweet like honey. It like glistened like there was glaze on it or something. I think is how the Bible described it from my memory. So. Alright, let's start on the next story, which looks like it was the Jericho story. The warrior leader. Joshua and the Battle of Jericho from Joshua 3 and 6. Okay. After Moses died, God gave his people a new leader. His name was Joshua, which means the Lord saves. Joshua was going to lead God's people into the special land God had promised to give them. By this time, God's people had been wandering around in that baking desert for 40 years, so you can imagine how sick they were of sand and any yellow thing, and tents, and walking and being hot. And how happy they were to reach the edge of the desert and to see their beautiful new home right there in front of them, all cool and green and lovely. There was only one problem: Jericho. Jericho was a city, but it wasn't just any old city. It was a fortress, and it stopped anyone from getting into the land. The people looked at Jericho, at the big, giant, scary walls all around it, and the tall, towering ramparts, the heavy iron gates bolted shut at each other. Walls of Jericho. What would they do? No one knew. But God knew, and God told Joshua what to do. But Joshua must have looked surprised, because it was a very odd battle plan indeed, as we'll soon find out. Then God made his people a promise: I will always be with you, and I will never ever leave you, if you do what I say. Your lives in the new land will be happy, and everything will go well. So Joshua gathered his army together. They had their swords and spears and shields. They were ready to fight. But the plan wasn't about fighting. It was about trusting and doing what God said. Joshua's army went marching around the city, day after day after day. They were too scared to fight, the people in Jericho said. But they were wrong. God's people weren't scared. They were waiting for God to tell them what to do next. On the 7th day, God told his people to march around the city, not once, but 7 times. Then God told everyone to make as much noise as they could. Has anyone ever told you to make as much noise as you possibly can? Well, imagine that noise. Add 39,999 other people making that noise too. And you get the idea. Ears splitting. And as it turned out, stones splitting too, because the huge, strong walls of Jericho just crumbled to the ground as if they were made of sand. Jericho vanished in a great cloud of dust. So it was that God's people entered their new home, and they didn't have to fight to get in. They only had to walk. Joshua said, God has brought you safely here. Now will you do what he says? Everyone said, we promise. Only God can make your heart happy, Joshua said, so don't pray to pretend gods. No, they said, never. I'm afraid they didn't keep their promise. They didn't do what God said, and many years later, just as God warned them, things would go badly for God's people. They would lose their home, enemies would capture them and take them off as slaves, and God's people would scatter into many different lands. But God's plan was still working. One day he would give his people another leader and another home, but this home no one could ever take from them. They made it to the land. God gave them victory over Jericho. The walls came tumbling down. The walls of Okay, let's move on to the next story. The teeny weeny true king. Samuel anoints David. This is from 1 Samuel chapter 16. God's people had a new land. Now they wanted a king. But God is your king, Samuel told them. He is the one who looks after you best. We want a real king, they said, one we can see. God knew that a king might not be kind to his people or look after them as well as he would. But God's people didn't care. They wanted a king, and they wanted him now. So God gave them a king. He was called Saul, and he seemed like a good king at first. But he became proud and stopped listening to God. He didn't obey God or love God with his whole heart. Saul can't help me with my plan, God said. I need a king who loves me and will teach my people to love me. I need a true king. God had just the one in mind. Go to Bethlehem, God told Samuel. You'll find the new king there. Samuel's job was to listen to God and tell people what God said. I guess this was Saul. I was just a servant. So Samuel went to the little town of Bethlehem. God told Samuel to go to Jesse's house. God was going to choose one of Jesse's sons to be the new king. Jesse had 7 strong sons. Now in those days, if you were going to be the king, you didn't have to be the richest or the cleverest, although that was always nice. You had to look like a king, which meant you had to be the tallest and the strongest. So you could carry the longest swords and biggest armor and defeat everyone. And it didn't hurt to be handsome either. Samuel asked Jesse to bring him each son in turn. So Jesse brought the oldest, tallest, strongest son. This must be the new king, Samuel thought. He looks like a king. But God didn't choose him. You're thinking about what he looks like on the outside, God told Samuel. But I am looking at his heart, what he's like on the inside. So Jesse showed Samuel his next oldest, tallest, strongest son. But God didn't choose him either. In fact, God didn't choose any of the 7 sons. Samuel said, "Is that all?" Jesse laughed. "Oh, well, there's the youngest one, but he's just the weakling of the family. He's only teeny. Bring him," Samuel said. It's like, not him, not him. Nope, 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 nope. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So he didn't choose any of them. Jesse's youngest son came running up, and God spoke quietly to Samuel. "This is the one." His name was David. "He has a heart like mine," God said. "It is full of love. He will help me with my secret rescue plan, and one of his children's children will be the king, and that king will rule the world forever." Samuel anointed David's head with oil, which was a special way to show that you were God's chosen king. "You will be the new king one day," Samuel told him. And sure enough, when he grew up, David became king. God chose David to be king because God was getting his people ready for an even greater king who was coming once again. Once again, God would say, "Go to Bethlehem. You'll find the new king there," and there, one starry night in Bethlehem, in the town of David, 3 wise men would find him. David being anointed with oil. Next story. Alrighty, let's move on to the next. The young hero and the horrible giant. God's people had some scary... this is found in 1 Samuel 17, the story of David and Goliath. God's people had some scary enemies, but the Philistines were the scariest of them all, and now the Philistines had come to fight them. The Philistines had a secret weapon called Goliath. Goliath was a terrifying soldier, and worst of all, a giant. A giant so strong and so tall and so scary that no one had ever been able to fight him and live to tell the tale. So there they were, the Philistines standing on the top of one hill, God's people standing on top of the other. Every day Goliath came out and shouted, "Send your best soldiers to fight me. If he wins, we will be your slaves. But if I win, you will be our slaves." No one spoke, no one moved. "Chickens," Goliath bellowed. "Your God can't save you. I'll rip your heads off and have you on toast." His beady, greedy eyes glowered at them hungrily from under his horrible helmet, as if any minute he really might just gobble them all up, and he laughed, his terrible laugh. Ha, 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 ha. It boomed, echoing horribly, around and around the dry, dry valley. Well, Goliath might just as well have been a green, slimy monster with 3 heads because God's people froze with fear. Their eyes glazed over and they turned deathly pale. They knew if someone didn't do something quick, if someone didn't save them, but God would do something. He would send someone to save them. Now you remember that David was the youngest son of Jesse. Well, his brothers were soldiers in the army. One day when David brought his brothers their lunches, he saw Goliath and he saw how scared everyone was. "Don't be afraid," David said. "I'll fight him for you." "You're only a little shepherd boy," the king said, "and Goliath is a great soldier. How will you fight him?" "God will help me," David said. So the king gave David his royal armor to wear, but it was too heavy and too big, and David couldn't even walk. "I won't need this," David said. Instead, David picked out 5 smooth stones from the stream. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Took his slingshot and walked towards Goliath. Step, step, step. Stones. Too heavy. Stall. Goliath walked towards David. Thud, thud, thud. "You?" Goliath peered down at the small boy. "I'm little," David shouted up to him, "but God is great." Goliath laughed an even terribler laugh than usual. Ha 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 ha. It went with just one swing of his giant sword. Goliath could finish the boy off, but David kept going. "It isn't how strong you are or how many swords and spears you have that will save you. It is God who saves you. This is God's battle, and God always wins his battles. Period." David put a stone in his sling, swung it around, and let it go. The little stone flew whiz like a bullet through the air and struck Goliath, thud, right between the eyes. Goliath stopped laughing. Dot, dot, dot. The little stone. Slingshot. He stumbled and staggered and crash, fell dead. When the Philistines saw Goliath was dead, they ran away. And when God's people saw them running away, they cheered. God had saved his people. David was a hero. Many years later, God would send his people another young hero to fight for them and to save them. But this hero would fight the greatest battle the world has ever known. They were cheering. I think, yeah, this looks like the Israelites cheering. He saved us. Goliath's dead. The little stone. It went bloop, right between his eyes. He was a very big dude. David was a little boy. One, two, three, 4, 5 stones that he picked up from the river. This is God's battle, and God always wins his battles. Period. Amen. That's what I live by every day. What I should live by, what I should remember every day. It's the Lord's battles. Alright. The Good Shepherd. David the Shepherd King. This is from Psalms 51, 2 Samuel 7, and a paraphrase of Psalms 23. David was a shepherd, but when God looked at him, he saw a king. Sure enough, when David grew up, that's just what he became. And David was a great king. He had a heart like God's heart, full of love. Now, that didn't mean he was perfect, because he did some terrible things. He even murdered a man. No, David made a big mess of his life. But God can take even the biggest mess and make it work in his plan. I need a new heart, Lord, David prayed, because mine is full of sin. Make me clean inside. God heard David's prayer. He forgave David, and he made David a promise. I'll make you great, David, and one day a king will be born into your family and will heal the whole world. Did you know that David was a songwriter too? In fact, his songs were so good, they might have been in the top 40 charts, if that had been invented then. David's songs are like prayers. They are called psalms, and this is one of them, the Song of the Shepherd. It's probably number 1 on the Psalms charts, and it goes like this. God is my shepherd, and I am his little lamb. He feeds me, he guides me, he looks after me. I have everything I need. Inside my heart is very quiet as lying still in soft green grass, in a meadow by a little stream. Even when I walk through the dark, scary, lonely places, I won't be afraid, because my shepherd knows where I am. He is here with me. He keeps me safe, he rescues me, and he makes me strong and brave. He is getting wonderful things ready for me, especially for me. Everything I ever dreamed of. He fills my heart so full of happiness, I can't hold it all inside. Wherever I go, I know God's never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever. Love will go to. Wherever I go, I know God's never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love will go to. I kind of read that wrong, sorry. God gave David that song to sing his people so they could know that he loved them and would always look after them, like a shepherd loves his sheep. And one day, God was going to do something that would inspire thousands upon thousands of new songs. God was going to show his people once and for all just how much he loved them. Another shepherd was coming, a greater shepherd. He would be called the Good Shepherd. And this shepherd was going to lead all of God's lambs back to the place where they have always belonged, close to God's heart. Little sheep, little lambs. One little sheep, two little ones, three little. They have little swirlies on their wool. Little leaves. Alright, let's go to the next. The next one is A Little Servant Girl and the Proud General, the Slave Girl and Naaman from 2 Kings 5. Naaman was a very important man in a very important army of a very important country. So you see, he was a very, very, very important. He was very, very important. But Naaman was sick. He had leprosy, which is a nasty thing that stops you from feeling anything. Bits of you fall off without you noticing, like bashed fingers and squished toes. It might sound funny, but it wasn't, and Naaman certainly wasn't laughing. There was no cure. It never went away, and in the end it killed you. Naaman needed help. Now there was a little slave girl who worked for Naaman, and she knew someone who could help him. But there was a problem. Naaman was her enemy. Not long before, Naaman had led an army raid on her home in Israel. He had killed her whole family, carried her off to Syria, and made her into his slave. Every night she cried herself to sleep. She had lost everything. Why would she, of all people, want to help Naaman? Didn't she hate him and want to hurt him back? Didn't she want to make him pay for the wrong he'd done? That's what you would expect. But instead of hating him, she loved him. Instead of hurting him back, she forgave him. That's really hard to do, I can't imagine. I want Naaman to get well, she said to her mistress. There's a man in Israel called Elisha who can heal him. I'll go, said Naaman, loading up his wagons and putting on his flashing armor. But I'll go to the palace, because that's where someone important like me gets healed. So he hurried off to Israel and went straight to the king. My healing, please, he announced. I can do lots of things, the king replied, but only God can heal. Just then a message from Elisha arrived. Send Naaman here, it read. So Naaman hurried off to Elisha's house, but Elisha didn't even come out and greet him. He just sent a servant instead. Does Elisha realize who I am? Naaman thought. But what the servant said next made him even crosser. Wash in there, he said. Just wash, Naaman laughed. In that slimy, stinky river? He looked around to see if this was some kind of joke. It wasn't. Any person can wash in a river, he thought. I am Naaman. I am important. I should do something important so God will heal me. And he rode off in a rage. Of course, you and I both know that's not how God does things. All Naaman needed was nothing. It was the one thing Naaman didn't have. God knew that Naaman was even sicker on the inside than he was on the outside. Naaman was proud. He thought he didn't need God. His heart didn't work properly. It couldn't feel anything. You see, Naaman had leprosy of his heart. God was not only going to heal Naaman's skin, he was going to heal his pride. He needed not just physical healing, but spiritual healing. And God knew that. Naaman finally agreed to wash in the river, and instantly his skin became smooth like a baby. Naaman wanted to pay Elisha. God healed you. You can't pay, Elisha said. It's free. And so it was that a very sick man was healed, all because of a little servant girl who forgave him. God knew sin was like leprosy. It stopped his children's hearts from working properly, and in the end it would kill them. Years later, God was going to send another servant to forgive as she did, to forgive all God's children and heal the terrible sickness in their hearts. Their hearts were broken, but God can mend broken hearts. Naaman was healed. It's like, I don't know. Bathe in there. All Naaman needed was enough. Stinky, smelly river. I had all these boils from the leprosy, and his hands were bandaged too. Hopefully I remember to cut that sneeze out, because it was a jump scare. he rode out to sea, king of Israel. Or Elisha's house. First he went to king of Israel and then to Elisha's house. Okay, let's do the next story. And then we have one more. Operation No More Tears. The rescuer will come. Prophecy. These are prophecies from Isaiah 9, 11, 40, 50, 53, 55, and 60. Prophecies of Jesus that the prophet Isaiah wrote about. Do you know what your name means? Well, there was once a man called Isaiah, and his name meant God to the rescue. That might sound like a bit of a funny name to you, but it was just the right name for Isaiah, because God had a special job for Isaiah. You see, Isaiah's job was to listen to God and then tell people what he had heard. Now God let Isaiah know a secret. God was going to mend his broken world. He showed Isaiah his secret rescue plan, Operation No More Tears. This is the message God gave Isaiah. It was like a letter God wrote to his children. Dear little flock, you are all wandering away from me. Like sheep in an open field, you have always been running away from me, and now you're lost. You can't find your way back. But I can't stop loving you. I will come to find you. So I'm sending you a shepherd to look after you and love you, to carry you home to me. You've been stumbling around like people in a dark room, but into the darkness a bright light will shine. It will chase away all the shadows like sunshine. A little baby will be born, a royal son. His mommy will be a young girl who doesn't have a husband. His name will be Emmanuel, which means God has come to live with us. He is one of King David's children's children, the Prince of Peace. Yes, someone is going to come and rescue you, but he won't be who anyone expects. He will be a king, but he won't live in a palace, and he won't have lots of money. He will be poor, and he will be a servant, but this king will heal the whole world. He will be a hero. He will fight for his people and rescue them from their enemies, but he won't have big armies, and he won't fight with swords. He will make the blind see. He will make the lamb leap like deer. He will make everything the way it was always meant to be. But people will hate him, and they won't listen to him. He will be like a lamb. He will suffer and die. It's the secret rescue plan we made from before the beginning of the world. It's the only way to get you back. But he won't stay dead. I will make him alive again. And one day when he comes back to rule forever, the mountains and trees will dance and sing for joy. The earth will shout out loud. His fame will fill the whole earth as the waters cover the sea. Everything sad will come untrue. Even death is going to die, and he will wipe away every tear from every eye. Yes, the rescuer will come. Look for him, watch for him, wait for him. He will come. I promise. Poor Isaiah. He read God's letter over and over to God's people, but no one listened to him at all, ever. They didn't want to hear God's promise. They didn't believe it. Did it sound maybe too good to be true? A story that ends happily ever after? Well, it does sound like a fairy tale, doesn't it? And as anyone will quickly tell you, fairy tales aren't true. Or are they? Love God. God's letter through Isaiah. be a king who would come as a baby. Jesus. He would come to save the whole world and make everything right again. He would not be born in a palace. Daniel and the Scary Sleepover. Daniel and the Lion's Den from Daniel 6. Things were not looking good for God's people. They had been captured and taken far from home, and now they were slaves of the king of Babylon. But God had not left his people. He was with them, and he was looking after them. Daniel loved God and obeyed him. Now God made Daniel able to understand lots of difficult things. So it wasn't long before the king of Babylon noticed him. King Darius liked how clever Daniel was, so he made Daniel his most important helper of all, and put him in charge of lots of other helpers. But the other helpers didn't like this. They wanted the king to like them best. They wanted to get rid of Daniel. So they spied on Daniel. They tried to find things wrong with Daniel. Things they could tell the king. Things they could... But there weren't any. None. They couldn't find anything at all. Except there was just the one thing every day, 3 times a day, without fail, no matter what. Daniel went to his room, closed the doors, and prayed. Daniel prayed. They're peeping through the door. They smiled to themselves. Let's get the king to make a law. No one is allowed to pray to anyone except to the king. Daniel won't obey this law, and he will be punished. They were pleased with themselves for being so clever. They hurried off to tell the king. The king liked their idea. He didn't know they were tricking him, so he made it into a law. Everyone must pray, only to me. If you don't, the lions will have you for their dinner. Daniel heard this. He knew it was wrong to pray to anyone except God. He had to do what God said, whatever it cost him, even if it meant he would die. So Daniel went to his room, closed the doors, and prayed. That's just what the bad men knew Daniel would do. They skipped straight off to tell the king. Oh, your most glittering highness, your law says, does it not, that everyone must pray to you alone, sire? Yes, said the king. Oh, magisterial brightness, then correct us if we're wrong, but... It would seem that Daniel is praying to God, not to you. The king was sad. He had been tricked. He didn't want to hurt Daniel, but he couldn't change his law. And so he let the soldiers throw Daniel to the lions. May your king, who you love so much, rescue you, the king said. The king actually didn't even want Daniel dead. It's the lions. The king went back to his palace, but he didn't sleep that night, not a wink. He tossed and turned until finally, at the first glimmer of dawn, he leaped out of bed and ran straight to the den. Daniel, he cried, has your God rescued you? Yes, Daniel shouted. God sent an angel to close the lions' mouths. And there, resting his head on Daniel's lap, was the biggest lion, purring like a little kitten. The king brought Daniel out of the den. Look, he said, Daniel doesn't even have a scratch. The king made a new law. Daniel's God is the true God, the God who rescues. Pray to him instead. God would keep on rescuing his people, and the time was coming when God would send another brave hero, like Daniel, who would love God and do what God said, whatever it cost him, even if it meant he would die. And together they would pull off the greatest rescue the world has ever known. It's Daniel with the lions. The king popped his head in the den. That's funny. God's messenger, Jonah and the big fish from Jonah 1-4 and Hebrews 1, verse 1 and 2. God had a job for Jonah, but Jonah didn't want it. Go to Nineveh, God said, and tell your worst enemies that I love them. No, Jonah said. Those are bad people doing bad things. Exactly, said God. They have run far away from me, but I can't stop loving them. I will give them a new start. I will forgive them. No, said Jonah, they don't deserve it. I'll run away, Jonah said to himself, far away, so far away that God won't be able to find me. Then I won't have to do what God says. It's a good plan, he said, because as far as he knew, it was a good plan. But you can't run from God. But of course it wasn't a good plan at all. It was a silly plan, because you can't run away from God. But he will always come and find you. Jonah went ahead with his not very good plan. One ticket to not Nineveh, please, he said, and boarded a boat sailing in the very opposite direction of Nineveh. Got his ticket and said, I am going off, away. Well, it wasn't long before a fierce wind blew and the boat started to lurch and pitch and roll and everyone started turning green. Jonah sat bolt upright in his bed. You see, the first thing that went wrong with Jonah's not very good plan was that God sent a big storm after him. The sailors couldn't sail their ship properly. We're sinking, they screamed and started throwing everything overboard. Suitcases, food, whatever they could find. By now, Jonah knew that the storm was his fault. Throw me in instead, he shouted to the sailors, and the storm will stop. The sailors weren't sure. It's the only way you can be saved, Jonah cried. And so 1, 2, 3. Splash! No sooner had Jonah hit the water than the waves grew calm. The wind died down and the storm stopped. Just then, when Jonah thought it was all over, when he was sure he was going to drown, God sent a big fish to rescue him. The fish swallowed Jonah whole with one big gulp. It's a big fish. It's in the belly of the fish. Jonah must have thought he died. It was so dark in there like in a tomb. But then he smelled the rotting food and felt the slimy seaweed and knew he wasn't dead. He was in the belly of the fish, sitting there in the darkness for 3 whole days. Jonah had plenty of time to think. Pretty soon he realized his plan was, a very silly plan indeed. He was sorry for running away. He prayed to God from inside the great fish and asked God to forgive him. After 3 days, the fish spat Jonah safely out onto a sandy beach. Just then, Jonah heard someone calling his name. Go to Nineveh, God said. And this time, Jonah said. Yes, he went straight to Nineveh and told everyone God's wonderful message. Even though you've run far from God, he can't stop loving you, Jonah told them. Run to him so he can forgive you. The people of Nineveh listened to Jonah and they started loving God. They learned to do what God said and to stop running away from him. Just like Jonah. Many years later, God was going to send another messenger with the same wonderful message. Like Jonah, he would spend 3 days in utter darkness. But this messenger would be God's own son. He would be called the Word, because he himself would be God's message. God's message translated into our own language. Everything God wanted to say to the whole world in a person. Okay, we have one more story before we end for this video. It was stormy. Big. Big fish. Jellyfish. seaweed. Belly of the fish. It's like the rib cage or something. The fish spit Jonah. Get ready. God's people return from being slaves. This is from Nehemiah 8 through 10, Malachi 1, 3, and 4, and then Ezra 7. Have you ever been to a party that lasted a whole week? How about a sermon that went on all day? Well, that's what's happened to God's people after they came home from being slaves. They had forgotten how God wanted them to live or who they were supposed to be. So Ezra and Nehemiah read them the rules God had given to Moses. But something odd happened. The more the sermon went on, the sadder they all got. Why? Was the sermon that boring? No, not really. It was strange, you see. As Ezra read the book of rules, it worked like a mirror. It showed them what they were like, and they didn't like what they saw. They saw that they had not been living the way that they should. They saw that they were cruel and selfish. We've blown it, they cried. Now God will punish us. They thought they knew what God was going to do, but they didn't. Of course, they might have picked up a clue from Ezra's name, which means help is here. And an even stronger one from Nehemiah's name, because his name means God wipes away our tears. And that, as you will see, is just exactly what God was getting ready to do. Ezra looked at God's children. Great hot tears were welling up in their eyes and streaming down their cheeks. He stopped his sermon mid-sentence and shut the book. We're having a party, he shouted. And so that's just what they did all week long. They were all sad. God wants us to be happy, Ezra said. All day they listened to stories about the wonderful things God had done for his people. How he made the world, how he gave a special promise to Abraham, how he rescued them from slavery, how he spoke to Moses and showed them how to live, how he brought them to a special land, how he rescued them no matter what time after time, over and over again, because of his never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. They remembered how God had always, all through the years, been loving his children, keeping his promises to Abraham, taking care of them, forgiving them, even when they disobeyed, even when they ran away from him, even when they thought they didn't need him. Then God told his children something more. I can't stop loving you. You were my heart's treasure, but I lost you. Now I am coming back for you. I am like the sun that gently shines on you, chasing away darkness and fear and death. You'll be so happy. You'll be like little calves running free in an open field. I'm going to send my messenger, the promised one, the one you have been waiting for, the rescuer. He is coming, so get ready. It had taken centuries for God's people to be ready, but now the time had almost come for the best part of God's plan. God himself was going to come, not to punish his people, but to rescue them. God was getting ready to wipe away every tear from every eye, and the true party was just about to begin. Okay, we'll save the next bit for Christmas Day. All the list of things they knew they hadn't followed. Alrighty, stay tuned for what comes next. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And I'll see you next time. Bye. Here's some tippy taps for those that like the tippy taps. And if you don't, you can just